Are you okay with the two-parter?
Yeah, I guess so.
This will be our longest episode, right?
Oh,
wow. In a good way.
I don't know how I feel about getting more airtime than Martin Luther King.
Martin Luther King wasn't part of the discussion.
That's true. If he was here, his episode would have been longer.
Oh, yeah. Sure. No, we'd still be talking about this.
Hello, and welcome back to Raise a Glass, the podcast where we talk about the stories and storytellers that shape us. Join us for part 2 of our artist interview with Andrew Mosher, where we conclude Eric's guessing game in Komodo Queen.
So start with the guy with the ferret in his head.
It's a mullet mohawk.
A mullet mohawk.
Yes.
Mullet hawk.
Punk mullet?
Yeah, punk mullet.
Some of me wonders why I don't see more of these people in my daily life, like in the grocery store, but shopping in the wrong places.
I don't know. You should go to rock concerts.
He looks to me like he could be a groupie of a band version of Anchorman.
Okay,
so this is like a jazz flute groupie. Like to me, like this is like
interesting.
Really...
I feel like he would only appreciate it at an ironic level, though. I don't think he actually would care about the jazz flute.
Okay. Yes.
He reminds me of like Dr. Disrespect. He's like a streamer.
Okay.
Let's
Eric's gonna show me a picture.
I also have no idea. Oh yeah, that
absolutely.
looks exactly like him.
Yes.
Yep. Hunter for the win on that one. Not that it's competition, but that was so accurate. The second guy.
DS9.
Yeah, Deep Space Nine.
Deep Space Nine. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, so that's a really simplified, small version of the space station.
Deep Space Nine. He's got some really impressive tattoos.
If you look really closely, I bet he has some of the same tattoos as the girl that you mentioned a few pages earlier. Mm-hmm. More of a borrowing from myself. Maybe not, though. Maybe I...
No, that's pretty accurate.
So the guy in the third panel, there was a guy who was doing like this contact juggling where he was rolling a ball all over his body.
Yeah.
But it was actually glowing. It was glowing.
Wow.
Like, so he was doing it before the lights went off, and it just looked like this white ball that he was doing. And he was not there with anyone. And he was so into his own world. And then when the lights in the club went down, he was just glowing. It was really incredible. And then I really made a fool of myself because I tried to take a picture. But since the lights had gone out, the flash turned on my phone.
Oh, no.
And so then here I am just shining a flash right in the people around me's face. So that was embarrassing.
I'm envisioning this guy as like a yogi telling your future with this ball. But I remember those infomercials. Like this is what I'm envisioning, those infomercials. Like buy this clear ball where you can do all these cool things. Yes. And you buy it. It's just like a paperweight.
Yeah. Yeah. Furoshiki.
About the third, Hunter, anything for the second or third one?
Red rum, but
that fourth one. Yeah, the fourth one is definitely a Shining kind of vibe.
100%. It's just with a mom and dad that don't want to pay for a haircut.
Yeah,
they have a bowl cut.
The haircut here is actually based on someone I see in my real life regularly.
Okay.
I won't say more than that because maybe it will be embarrassing. but they really had that bowl cut.
I was just really excited to talk about this fifth one. This is, to me, Forrest Gump when he's running.
Okay.
Like this is
the
like
big white beard.
The big beard. Like all I could think of when I think to this is like Forrest Gump, like a year into his running.
Yes. I was thinking Duck Dynasty.
That's what I was going to say. Exactly. Yeah.
Sixth one. This is probably the most unique character I feel like I've interacted with in this. Like I come back to this character multiple times.
Really?
Because I don't understand what's happening with his face.
He's like, doing duck lips.
Okay, because like that's what I see, but I'm also like, but why?
Because he's a frat guy, so he has like a fake bronzer on. He's got his pop collar. He's got his pursed lips, his little slicked up hair,
little Jersey Shore.
Yeah, very much so.
He doesn't know what's happening.
No, so I drew it wrong. What I should have done is had him standing next to a girl who's dressed very differently, and she's into the band, and he's along for the ride. Because that's really what the idea here is. So I should have made it a 2-shot.
Okay, that's great though. You conveyed that without the person. Like it's very clear that
he doesn't.
He is out of place.
Yes.
Everybody else in this, the other eclectic people, like they all make sense.
Yeah.
He's just like but why is this person? Like, why is Alpha, Beta, Kappa chilling with that? I'm sure this isn't correct, but I think of Sonny and Cher a little bit.
I don't think so.
Good. Okay, who do you think of? What are you thinking of?
I was thinking kind of a Woodstock kind of vibe with the hair and the style of glasses.
The modern Woodstock.
Is that the mother?
Mask.
Yeah. No, that's supposed to be the girlfriend, but I can see why you think that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just kind of like the messy big hair.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I might know the guy in the mask. I feel like
it
might just be somebody else.
This was also I had meant to put masks more throughout to really give a sense of the time. There is the part earlier in the book where we're asked to show our vaccination cards. So when I went to see the show, it was 22. So lockdown had been over for a while and things were feeling some kind of normal, but it was still very different to go into a large crowd of people. And all they did was, if you didn't have your vaccination card, they said, "Can you please wear a mask?" And that was it. And a lot of people did. But I didn't draw them as much because I didn't remember to.
Yeah.
So I remembered to put it in here because it was on the note on my thumbnail to put a mask on the guy.
Interesting. I'll draw anything on the second to last picture.
Nothing interesting. I'm just thinking punk, goth.
Go on the last one now.
Yeah.
Does she have hair? Is she bald minus like?
Yeah,
hair?
so she has bangs and like hair at her ears, but the rest is shaved.
So did you ever read the the little kid's nursery rhyme? Jack Sprat could eat no fat, his wife could eat no lean, but in between them both, you see they
lick the platter clean.
That's kind of what these two people are doing with their hair.
Yes, he only has hair on top, and she only has hair in the front and the side. Yes, that's funny. So drawing punk characters and goth characters is something I go back to a lot, because I just think that the fashion is very interesting. I think it's a very, very expressive kind of style to have. I was homeschooled for most of my life, and then when I joined public school, I was a junior in high school, and I had no idea how to navigate social settings or things like that because I was just with my family for my whole life, and I ended up at the table with the punks, and so my first non-Christian music was like Rancid and Sex Pistols and these things that were, punk songs. And I just had a real fondness for that because they were so nice to me and they're so welcoming. And
it's amazing.
Even though I was, loud and proud about being a church boy and bringing my Bible to school and stuff, and they hated all that, but they were still really kind to me. and so I always have a soft spot for those characters, so I had to include them here.
That's amazing. Well, thanks for humoring me on that. I'm enjoying it. I think I'll just based off this conversation so far, when I go back through these, I think I'm going to see them in even kind of maybe a fuller light. Just notice things I hadn't noticed before. Is there anything else you want to say about Komodo Queen?
Nothing really I want to highlight out of it. I just will say I'm glad to hear that you both like it. I'm really proud of the book. I think it's my best work as a whole, and I'm very proud. There's a lot of firsts in there for me. It's my first full length that I wrote. It's my first one that I colored, and I'm really proud of the artwork in it. So, yeah, I'm. Thanks for taking the time to read it, and I'm glad you guys enjoyed it.
Well, thank you for sharing it, and it really feels the visual payoff at the end of this is worth it. I almost feel like I go from reading a really interesting story to watching it feels like the TV is on, the music's playing full blast, you're just being overwhelmed with sound, and you communicate that through the visual, and the colors really pop in telling that story, which is really, I've been at concerts and it's really hard to take pictures because the pictures don't tell the story.
Yeah.
Because the picture shows different colors than you experience. And even when it doesn't even tell the colors, but this uses colors and shading and lighting. You can see the lighting on characters.
Yeah. Yeah, because when they're up on stage, they have the stage lights, but then they also had a big screen behind them, so they're being double lit with different colors, and so you get the blends here. Mm-hmm. This is one of the. It's only with the band and some of the shots of the crowd where I did any sort of non-flat coloring, where I actually used gradients. It's just in these last few pages of the book to help it stand out more.
We could talk about all your other comics. I know you've got more. I think maybe it's probably not the right thing to spend another hour talking about those, and then while talking about your other storytelling. Is there, of the three others? I think three. There's the Nightmarish one, or the
Nightmarish double feature.
Yeah, there's the there's four. There's the Gurls.
The Girls from the Stardust Consortium.
There's the I'm gonna remember this. There's the one of you traveling around Europe. Belgium.
Yeah. So Belgian beer. So that what I shared with you is just the first 7 pages or so. That's going to be a graphic novel. That's going to be 80 pages.
I'm really excited to see it.
That one I started last year, and then I realized that it was a big story, and so I did Komodo Queen instead. Komodo Queen still took me a full year to make, and that was only 24 pages. So 80 pages is going to take me a while, but I'm going to try to. That's my next focus is Belgian beer.
And the back, you're telling a story of a place.
Yeah. So the idea with that one is that you could. It's very heavily researched, and you could use it as a travelogue. The places that we eat, the beers that we get, the touristy things that we go look at, it's all accurate. Or it's going to be accurate when I draw it. Yeah. So that's heavily researched. So that's very much a lot of architecture drawings, a lot of that kind of classic European architecture. So that one in Komodo Queen, I pushed myself by drawing crowds in every panel, and in Belgian beer, it's going to be pushing myself to draw, full 3-point perspective cityscapes and
Wow.
and architecture in every panel. So we don't need to talk about that though, because that's not a finished story yet.
Okay.
And I don't know what the other one is.
The other one is also not finished.
The Huntsman's Offering. That's just 4 pages right now. So
is there going to be any words in that one?
No, that's going to be a silent comic. That one's going to be 40 some pages. I'm going to try to do that one in tandem with Belgian Beer, because that's a smaller book. I'm drawing it at a smaller size. And it's just going to be 2 colors. I'm going to print it on the risograph. So I think I can do that one quicker. I'm using different tools for that one too, which allow me for a quicker workflow. Okay. So I'm going to try to get that one done this calendar year. Okay. In tandem with working on the graphic novel.
I think that one might bring people to tears.
I think so. We won't talk about it.
Okay.
But
sorry. Okay.
Yeah. It'll be my most mature and emotional story, even though it'll have no words.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's just spend a few minutes, because we don't have them in front of us physically. We can pull up on our phones, but talking about in tandem, the Nightmares.
Yeah.
Which again is not what it's called.
Nightmarish double feature.
Nightmarish double feature. And then about Gurls. Andre, have you get a chance to look through those?
Yeah.
Okay. If you're okay with it, let's try to maybe not spend as much time on them as we spend on these pieces. Can you give us a little bit of an overview of Nightmares?
Yeah, so Nightmarish double feature, it's envisioned as like a drive-in experience, or one of those back when people still bought DVDs. You get those DVDs of horror movies packed together, which is something I used to buy a lot.
So it's like two.
Yeah, you have the 2 movie posters on the front cover of the DVD, and that's what the front cover of the comic is. It's these 2 movie posters for the 2 stories. So one is I Dug My Own Grave, and the other one is called Brights. And it's just 2 8-page stories. This is a very small comic. It's a mini comic. It's at like a quarter of a size of copy paper. So it's a very small book physically, only a couple panels on each page. And this is a story of nightmares that I had in my 20s, just nightmares that I would have over and over and over again. And I finished this last year before I got too far into Komodo Queen, because I was having a little trouble writing Komodo Queen. And so I did this book as a writing exercise where I already had 2 fully formed stories, because I already had the nightmares, and all I had to do was write a punchline and figure out how to pace the story so that I could fit it to 8 pages. So it was kind of a writing exercise. Also, I just wanted to do a small book to test out the risograph. I had just joined the printing club. And I did this as a 2-color, black and red, nice horror story colors. And I wanted to try something that wasn't just slice of life.
Like how they both end. You wake up with your wife at the end of the digging your own grave one is, you stole all the covers.
Yeah.
And then and waking up at the end of the doppelganger one.
Yeah. Yeah, waking up with myself in the bed next to me.
Right.
And then re-waking up and it's my wife and we're both screaming.
I sometimes have pretty vivid night dreams. I wake up screaming, which is not so good when you have a newborn.
Yeah.
Do you still have these dreams or things like that?
No, I don't. In my 20s were hard for me mentally and emotionally, and it was really just both of these stories are, I put comedic endings on them, but they were nightmares and they ended very darkly, and they happened to me every night. And so I would wake up in a panic. But maybe this is too heavy to share, but I've been in therapy for over 10 years at this point, and I have some medication to help me. And so I'm not plagued by stress dreams or fear dreams anymore. So I haven't had, I will occasionally have one, but it's like one a year instead of 2 a night every night for 5 years.
Wow.
Big difference. Does the act of telling the story, like drawing it out, like help like in your like process? Like for me, like I don't do it often, but sometimes taking time to write out how I'm feeling, or like write a letter, like, or something, will actively like, I don't know what the right wording is, but like it like bring me peace in a sense. And like, I don't know if this was like, if the act of like drawing this out was also like peace giving to you.
It was, in the sense that I took something that was very hard for me in the past and turned it, like I had agency over it. And so I could create something with it in a very direct way. And give a little look in a light way at something that was quite serious at the time. I feel I'm not the writer yet, anyways, to do a real comic on mental health. I explore that topic a little bit in regular life here and there, but it's just such a heavy subject, and something that is very easy and very often done wrong in movies and books and things. And I've only written a couple comics, so I'm not sure I have the chops to give it the proper weight and respect. It is something I'd like to tell, though, because it's a big part of my life. So this was just a way to approach that in a very light way and give it a funny ending, so that you can read it and not even get any of the mental health stuff behind it, and just appreciate it as a quick little story.
It means a lot that you're willing to share that. I really appreciate it. And think about when we were making this one, the way that the red dye would come off on the fingers a little bit.
Yeah.
And just like, I feel like that risograph like just feels like it's the right thing for this particular strip because it's like tactile. Like it's almost like it bleeds off the page and it bleeds onto your hand. Like you can't. I think if the story used to go when you used to pull those like fire alarms, like you would spray a red dye in your hand. Like this is something that sticks with you.
Yeah,
like the stories you tell in regular life stick with you. They're not all maybe just meant for a laugh. It's meant to like to think about it and because it's not an answer. It's not like this isn't the end. It's an ongoing part of life.
Yeah. So the physical nature of the printing process and the final physical object in the end feels right. Yeah, I like that.
Can we talk about the Gurls and the
Star Death Consortium?
Star Death Consortium. So I read this story and I was like, wait, this isn't Andrew. Like this is the
Yes, yeah. So the Gurls is my debut comic book. I had a couple failed starts at making a comic book before this, but this is the first one I actually finished. I worked with a writer, and so this is not me. I'm not in the story. It's the only it's the only comic book I have where I'm not the star. So yeah, if you look for me in here, you're not going to find me.
And it's a story about a band.
It's a story about a band, yeah. So it still has the musical hook. At the time, I was doing live drawings with a rock band. So they would put on a show, and I would have my easel up there with a giant piece of paper and a big marker, and I would draw while they played. And the leader of that band is Kim, and he's the author of this comic. So he had me write this story of this band that he had in the 70s. So this is also a true story, like Regular Life and Komodo Queen. True enough. Yeah. And yeah, so it has that in common with the rest of my work. We're looking at some of the pages now, and you can see my growth where the first few pages are like an illustrated story where I have blocks of text next to an image. And then I start to put the text with the images, and then I start to introduce comic panels. And then I start to bring in heavy black and fill most of the page with black. And that's where I kind of got my footing, where I felt good about the way it was looking. Oh, this is cool.
I love the multiple hands in the shots of the band members. Okay.
Oh yeah, the way they're early on where they're playing their music and you see to show the motion.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was a fun way to show it. I like the bass player with the extra fingers.
Yeah.
That was a little more subtle.
I definitely both interact with and like seen bass players that I'm like, you got to have an extra free hand. I got to understand how you're like. I got a chance to see one of my favorite bass players play once, and I was like, how are you doing this? Like, I don't understand. Like, there is so much sound and noise, like and like groove.
Yeah,
I can't understand how it's happening.
Yeah,
is this poster for the Stardust Consortium? This like creature.
Yeah,
on the poster.
Yeah, that was a real artifact. So the guy had a gig poster from that show from the 70s. He had, and he gave it to me for reference. So it's not the one on the cover here. It's this one a third of the way through the book. That's a very line for line recreation. It was fun to do that font by hand to match the font that was used on the poster. It was fun.
Was it actually fun, or was it actually super stressful?
No, it was fun because there's a lot of times in comics, like in a Marvel or a DC comic, there's a person and their whole job is to do the lettering. And so you can really do a lot with it if you want. And so there's a whole design aspect to creating a font. And then there's a very precise technical aspect to executing that font. This one is very sloppy compared to the original poster from the 70s. I don't know how they did it, because every one of their curves had the exact same radius as every other curve. It was just a design thing of beauty. So I had to recreate it. So it was fun. I did enjoy it.
Do you have a favorite font?
No. Arial. But that's just because my day job is an engineer and I do technical writing. So I just go for legibility.
Right.
As long as you didn't say Comic Sans, I might have called you out on that one.
Yeah. I like to do all my writing by hand in my comics. So I don't really do a specific font. It's just my handwriting with, I have a tool that rules out even lines, so I can at least keep my letters the same size and keep them in a straight line. But I prefer that over using a font. It just gives a little more life to it.
Yeah.
So I don't want to give away this story because it's
this is a proper story.
Amazing.
With a beginning, middle, and end.
And one of the things they say, and I don't think it's giving away the story at all, is that was the best rock and roll show I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I felt this is hilarious.
Yeah.
And intense.
Yes.
And very unexpected. As a reader, I was...
Yeah, it's a really great story. It's a true rock and roll crazy story. With like a front man for a band that is just too out there and too crazy for their own good. And yeah, it's a really good story. I really got to give props to the guy. It's a true story, but even so, I know writing a well crafted version of a true thing that happened so long ago. There's a real art to that.
And when you partnered with somebody in this,
Yeah.
how did it work? Did he write out a story and then you would like
He gave me a script, and the script was verbatim the words in this story.
Okay.
I didn't change anything. I think the only thing I did was I took out the swear words because I didn't feel comfortable putting that in something of mine. You'll see there's some like cartoon swearing in it where it's just the symbols. So I think that was my editorial. But he just gave me it, and so it was just written out like a prose story, which is especially why the early pages of this comic book are more like an illustrated book where it's a block of text and an illustration, because I hadn't quite figured out how to split it up. But he gave me the script and he said, do whatever you want. He said, it's just got to be a comic book. So
what did he think about it?
He loved it. Yeah, he thought it was really good. He was really, really happy with it. He has been like a part of the Rochester and surrounding area comic scene for a long time. Worked in different comic shops over the years, and a collector. He goes to comic shows and sells comics and collectibles. And so it was kind of a dream for him to have his own comic book. So
what an amazing partnership.
Yeah.
I have a potentially like good ending question, but before we get there, is there stuff that we want to?
Let's talk a little bit about the art. Can we talk a little bit about art?
Yeah, the paintings.
Yeah, the paintings you shared, and just a little bit about kind of how you go about marketing those pieces, because I want people to be thinking about that before we.
Now, when you say marketing, you mean like
the art shows,
the art festivals,
and also some of the other events that you work on.
Yeah,
I've been invited to.
Yeah, so
because you're doing some like very unique things that I'd never heard of before.
Okay, yeah. So first, I guess we can talk a little bit about the venues that I use for sharing my pieces, and then we can talk about some of these specific paintings that I've sent you guys. So as I mentioned before, I did live drawing with a band. That was a very early thing for me. That was before I did any art festivals or anything like that. So I did that for a while, for basically a year or two. And then I started doing art festivals. So Rochester, I'm sure it's common in many cities around the country, but Rochester has a lot of art festivals. And the cities within an hour or so of us also have a lot of art festivals. And so I started to show at those. So I have a 10 by 10 tent, and I made some walls out of essentially chicken wire and wood. And I hang up a bunch of paintings that I made, and I do mini portraits of people who come to the show. And so it's the size of a playing card, and it's an ink drawing of the person. And so they stand there, and it takes me about 3 minutes, and I draw them in my style. It's not a caricature. I will be a little snobby and say I don't like caricature. I think it's lazy, and I think that it can accentuate the wrong parts of a person, and people can have bad experiences with caricature. So what I tried to do is to draw it capturing realistic details, but doing it in my style, which is kind of simplified. People have a lot of fun with that, and we have good conversations. And so that's the main thing I do. But then I also last year started doing weddings. So instead of a photo booth, people can hire me to draw these mini portraits. So I'll come to the reception, and as many people as want portraits can come up, and I will draw them. And that's a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed doing that. I've done that for other events too, not just weddings. I have I have 2 weddings this year already, later in the year. So yeah, it's exciting.
It's amazing. We had a couple in our bedroom for multiple years. I don't know where they are now, but which I didn't bring them downstairs. But they're like on our mantle in our bedroom for multiple years. And they're I love them.
Yeah, and those were from my wedding.
Yes,
for my wife. So for my wedding, I made over 200 pieces of art because I made a portrait of every guest.
Wow.
That had their table number on it. So basically, to let you know where you should sit, you got a portrait of yourself.
It was incredible.
And then I made paintings for the centerpieces.
That had to take as long as regular life took.
It took a long time, but and a lot of Facebook stalking to find reference photos of everyone, because I didn't even know who half the people were. So that was fun.
And I really enjoyed. I've gotten to see you only at probably a 1 hour show, I think, but it's just a really cool environment.
Yeah, it's fun. It's they're festivals, so a lot of times there's music, there's food, sometimes there's beer and things like that, and people are just walking around. A lot of people are not there to shop, but they can come in and I have a mix in my paintings right now of like original designs, and then I have things that are based on bands and movies and TV shows. And so people can usually find something that they relate to. And a lot of the movies and TV shows and bands and stuff are more not mainstream necessarily. They're a little more esoteric, or they're horror movies, or whatever. And so it's the sort of thing where if you know what it is, you're probably going to enjoy it. So that's fun.
So the pieces you brought for us, I think I've seen, maybe not all of it, but most of these before.
Yeah.
And I think they're just such a great example of the work you do. Again, with what you shared earlier, and I wrote it down because I was trying to remember, capturing a quiet moment, capturing something only the individual can hear, and that was your goal in the comics, but also all the work you do.
Yeah, that's a common thread. As someone who spent a lot of time living in my own head, the inner monologue is something that's ever present, and it's definitely there in a strong form for my characters.
Is there anything you want to let us know about these pieces that you chose, or?
Let's talk. So the one that's called Bodacious Friendship. So this is a watercolor painting of 2 people that are laughing. It's a guy and a lady, and the guy has his one hand he's like holding his chest because he's laughing hard, and the other hand is on the shoulder because they're good friends. And the lady is a cyclops. She has one large eye in the center of her face. Otherwise, she's a normal human person. And the guy is wearing an eye patch over one eye. And they're happy. They're having a good time. And part of the friendship is that they can share their life experience. One person was born with one eye and the other person had something happen so that one of their eyes is not used anymore. Mm-hmm. And so they arrive at a similar place through two different paths. And so even when, no one can know exactly what you've been through, because even if you have the same events happen, you're two different people and you process it differently. Yeah. You take different things away from it. So they're not in exactly the same spot because no two people are, but they can still appreciate each other and have an easy point of reference and can have an appreciation for the other person and how they feel, what they process. And so it just makes for easy, fast friends was the idea with this picture.
I really liked the one that was also about eyes was I care for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where it's kind of a similar idea. But there's a guy who is holding up a glass of water for a woman whose eye is hanging out of her head and her eyeball is in the glass of water. And then she has a little spritzer bottle and she is spritzing his eye, which is also hanging out of his head.
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't know if macabre is the right word, but like macabre and sweet.
Yeah.
It's a great juxtaposition.
Yeah. Well, it's there's this highbrow, lowbrow kind of thing where a lot of parts of our life are not pretty. They're ugly or they're gross or they're weird or they're not good experiences or whatever. And so this is just a shorthand way of showing, again, the same thing that's in the other painting that we just discussed, two people who have had something happen and they're able to care for each other, following on their similar experiences. And so it is sweet. It's a sweet moment. Some people will immediately dismiss the picture as gross. But I think it just makes it fun. And for a while, I had a couple years where everything I drew had to do with eyes falling out of heads. It still happens a lot. There's just something about the image. It's a very cartoon way. It's not actually gross. There's no gore. It's not realistic in any way. It's a very much a cartoon eye hanging by the nerve coming out of an eye socket that's just a regular shape of an eye. And there's something about that image that I find very funny and very satisfying. So I've drawn a version of that many times.
I love all the things you draw, Andrew. I really do. And just looking at these other two pictures we didn't discuss, or the first two pictures which we didn't discuss, and the one of the person sitting with his coffee in front of him, empty page, and like this, I would call it like a blue devil on his head, kind of laughing, and looks downcast to me.
Yeah, this is a really good example of what I try to capture. And this is my wife's favorite thing that I ever made. This is in her permanent collection. she requested that I never sell this one and that we hang on to it. So this is in our bedroom right now. So it's a guy, he's got his big cup of coffee. He's got an empty piece of paper in front of him with a pencil. And the little blue demon on top of him, he's like sitting on his head, and he has a little cappuccino, and he's really happy. The little demon is really happy, and the guy is quite nervous. This little blue guy shows up in a lot of my drawings and in the kind of miscellaneous things I have. So I've designed stickers and enamel pins that feature this blue character, this little blue devil, because he is anxiety, he is fear, he is depression, and he is loving life because he is making this guy feel really self-conscious. This guy clearly wants to write something, but the page is empty, and he is going to have a heck of a time putting the first word down on the page because he's going to overthink it. And yeah,
that's how I felt lately.
Yeah, for writers and for visual artists, the empty page is often an intimidating thing to start on.
Yeah. We just layers was. I guess there's one more at the end where you've got person whose head is chopped off.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that. That's not as interesting.
I've seen this one in your house. Right? Is this one in your house?
Was it
yes. At one point? Okay.
Yes, this one is in my house.
I've seen this, and this is one of the most quote unquote gory things.
That it's still not gory. It's still not. It's like an anatomical, scientific drawing. So the picture is of a man, and he is holding a mask with his hand in front of his face, and the mask is not realistic. It's a happy face with like a long Pinocchio nose, colored with, to look like it's real facial colors, but the eyes are just circles and the mouth is just a little smiley mouth. Then you have the man's face, and he is looking very worried, and he's looking behind him as if something is on the periphery, or something is out to get him, or he's looking to see if someone is looking at him. He's quite nervous about it. But his face is not connected to his head. His face is floating in front of his head like a mask. And you see inside of his head. So you see skull and the interior of an eyeball. You see muscle. You see brain. You see teeth, and you see a cross section of a tongue.
I love that part. I love the cross section of the tongue personally.
Yeah. So in this piece, this image, I did this image as an ink drawing first, and someone purchased it. And then years later, I went back and had to paint it because this was such a powerful image to me. These masks, there was a motif that I did for a whole year. Most of the pictures I drew that year had these masks. And it's not a super deep thing, to read into. Having a mask on is even a phrase that we say today, where you put on a happy face and no one knows what's really going on inside. And I wanted to just take that a step further and see that you have the mask that you hold, then you have your face, which can betray what's going on inside, but then you actually get to see inside this guy. But rather than it just being the emotions that you see inside, it's more exploring the physicality of the human body. And for me, there's a wonder of all these complex thoughts and emotions that we have, and it's all coming out of just these very physical blobs of flesh in our body. It's really quite amazing. And so when you think about the anatomical and the chemical aspect of the different emotions that we have, it's just very interesting that these things can be explained scientifically, and yet it's so hard to understand at an emotional way or to process what these things are doing to our physical body and manifesting as emotions. And it does look ugly inside. You say this is the closest I get to gore in my finished pieces. And it's ugly, but it's also, I tried to do it as like an anatomical drawing. So you see the cross section, so you can see the inner workings. So there's an intellectual curiosity about what's going on inside with the way it's presented.
This piece always sticks out to me. It helps me hear you say, like, kind of talk through it, because I love the decision to add the anatomical piece, because like I'm used to just the mask in front of the face, and that extra third level for me is like I just spend a lot of time thinking about it. Even just what you shared, like helpful. I'm also going to spend more time thinking about it whenever I see it, because it's the face, the eyes in particular of this character, like the way the shading and the coloring of it, and where everything about it just feels. Some of the best parts of art is you keep coming back to it, like without like.
Yeah, and I think that there is some nugget in this composition that is not even what I've explained it, because what I've explained is what it means to me and what I'm thinking about. But I think that there's something in this image that, as you say, you can look at it and think different things or feel different things. This is probably one of the best pieces I've ever made.
Stories touch on something eternal. Like we talked about soul earlier at the end of Komodo Queen, right? They hit you in the soul, and they touch on something eternal, and you can like sometimes you can interact with that in books, poetry, songs, visual art, dance, and I think this one. I think many of the pieces we've talked about like do that. But this front for me, what you're saying, it's just I can't bring it together because it's not something that can be brought together. Because if you could define eternity, if you could define like that, it doesn't. It's not eternity. It's not. There's an aspect of it that is undefinable, and like the way that God's at work, and like I feel it. I feel it when I look at this piece.
Awesome.
In particular.
Are there paintings that you regret selling?
I don't think there's anything that I regret selling. My regret is that I haven't taken pictures of everything I've made. So I've sold things and I don't have any copy.
Yeah.
And I'm still really bad about that. My wife gets on my case and she's right. You know, I drew it. I should have a copy of it. I should at least have a little phone picture of it. But it's interesting because when I look at these paintings, so these ones that I selected to show you are from a few years ago. And I don't remember painting them anymore. I don't remember the task of creating them. I remember some of the feelings and some of the thoughts. And I don't own most of I guess I own a couple of them, but no, it's okay for it to go somewhere else. In fact, when I first started my first art show, I hung up 25 paintings in a restaurant, and the price for all of them was $20. Because I just wanted people to have them if they were interested in having it. because I know that it feels bad sometimes if you like a piece of art and then, oh, it's very expensive.
Right.
Or I think that art should be priced appropriately. I think it's good to pay for art. But I like it to be cheap because if someone likes it, I want them to have it because they're going to get more out of it than I am. If I hang on to it, it's just going to sit in a bin in my basement until I dig it out for the next art show.
I'm looking up one of my absolute favorite things that Andrew has ever created that I've seen, and it reminded me because of that art show, which I wasn't at, but I knew you around that time.
Yeah.
And I've Googled in the past, and I feel like it's shown up. And I need to share it with you because Hunter, and I think you should. It's just so funny. I had a bottle of this wine for a while, and in one of the moves, it must have not traveled with us. But I used to take times, even when we lived in Chicago, to show friends this wine bottle because I thought it was, and still think it is, one of the greatest and funniest wine bottles I've ever seen. And it does a great job of communicating the style of your art, as well as like the wit, like the number of times I found myself laughing as I've read things that you've done. And then also like thinking, honestly, Hunter, I probably showed you this before. Do you want to share about it?
Yeah. So I designed a label for a wine bottle, and the wine was called Pinot Envy. And so I have two gentlemen standing next to each other. They're dressed in kind of 1950s suits and hats, and they're holding wine glasses, and one guy is looking pensively at the other guy and kind of frowning because the other guy is holding a giant wine glass full of wine, whereas the first guy is just holding a regular size wine glass. So he is envious of the other man's Pinot.
It's so funny. It's so funny.
Where's the thrill for you? Like, where in the process? Because I have been, like, for me, when I'm writing, the thrill is when I'm drafting, like on an empty page, and I discover something about the story, and discover something new about a character, or come upon a phrase that I really like, or a sentence or something. And it's not so much in the editing or the publishing, although that is like gratifying. But it's to the point where I don't feel like I'm actually writing unless I'm like actively drafting regularly. So like where is that for you? Like, what keeps you coming back?
Yeah. So for me, it is for comics, it's when I ink. And for my paintings, it's when I do the outline. Because even my paintings, I still outline my characters. I have a very similar style, whether it's a comic book or a painting. But this relates to an earlier part of the discussion where I talked about the hard part is design. The hard part is doing the pencils and figuring out how to lay out the scene. It's a lot of logistics and planning on how to communicate the idea. But what's really fun for me and what I really live for is when I put that line down, because if it's a painting, I do watercolor and it's just a bunch of blobs. And then you put that line to separate the different colors and it comes to life on the page. You're looking at an actual piece. So that's the moment where the painting looks good to me.
Yeah.
And with a comic, I've done a lot of work to get to the part where I put the pencils down on the page and I can understand if it's going to work or not. But it's in a light blue pencil on a white piece of paper, and it's not really an artifact that brings me joy. But when I put the black line on, especially if I'm inking with a brush, and I can do a long line, just a long smooth line, the act, the motion of my hand against the paper, and just seeing that clean, stark black line against a white paper is very satisfying. Very, very satisfying. That's my favorite part.
So I was looking for a book that Hunter and I have both read that I don't think I have anymore. It was both a book we were both forced to read, which means that neither of us really enjoyed it before we went to college.
Oh,
and most of our classmates didn't read it, which made both of us even that much more salty about it. It was called Evocative Objects, and it was a story of, it's like 25 little memoirs, like short little biographical memoirs of objects that mean something deep, have a depth of meaning to the person. And so, like, the one that connected with me the most, it's not going to be surprising, somebody writing about a cello. And I'm not a cellist, but I play an instrument that it gets misnamed and misunderstood to be a cello all the time. And I don't even remember the specific story, but I just remember the way in which that was an object that, or an artifact, and you said the word artifact, that held a depth of meaning beyond even what it looked like or what it sounded like. And you're used to the word artifact, and I think it's the second time you've used that today, maybe third. It made me think about that, and the way that there is a point of transition in the stories you tell, where it goes from something that could be to something that is. And it takes on a deeper meaning when that happens. It goes from a possibility to an artifact.
Yeah, it's really the transition from internal to external. Yeah, I like that. That's really cool.
that is a very cool watch, by the way. Speaking of
Thank you.
objects.
Yes, I found the absolute most 90s watch I could find.
Is it a Casio?
No, but it is designed to look
Right.
like the Casios from the 90s. Yeah. It is what is it? A Shark.
A Shark.
Freestyle watch.
Nice.
Yeah.
Have you thought about putting any of your art on t-shirts?
Yeah. And Katie, my wife, is on me on that every year. Is this the year you're going to make t-shirts or a hat or something? I have my art on a t-shirt for that band that I did. I designed their album cover for one of their albums, and they put it on a t-shirt. I think it would be cool. I'm just really bad at thinking about merchandise and thinking about how people are actually going to look at the pictures that I draw. Stepping into comics, coming from creating paintings, when I have a painting, I have one of the painting. And so one person can enjoy it.
Yeah.
And having a comic, it's cheap, so it's easy to purchase. And I have hundreds of them. So, well, not the ones that you and I made by hand. So we have less of those because
Dozens.
we have dozens of them. But they can be enjoyed by more people. And I really like that idea. And so putting something on a shirt is interesting to me. What keeps me from doing it is really just more the boring logistical side of the business of maintaining a warehouse, essentially somewhere in my own home of different sizes of shirts. And so I'm hesitant.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask a question about AI art, and that sort of that's because that's a whole thing now.
Yeah.
But I'm struggling to find like the right question to ask. And how do you feel about AI art? Is it? I don't know.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I really, really, really dislike it. So there are different aspects to it that trouble me. So the easy one that I won't talk about too much is the way that the AIs are trained on looking at pieces of art so that they can learn, quote unquote, how to create their own. And so they are taking from art from all over the world and creators all over the world. And those artists and creators are not given credit, are not given recompense for having their work appropriated and then regurgitated in some altered form to be an AI painting. So I don't think that has been ethically done. I also, it's just, and maybe, I'm nearly 40, so maybe I'm just turning into an old man who is railing against technology, but it's very sad to me to see people use an app to generate an image for them when, as I said earlier, you can make a drawing with what you have in your house already. If you have an idea, then you can make it. And if you don't like how it turns out, then you can try it again. I think that art, and not just drawing, but writing, you can write if you have paper and pencil, or if you have a phone with a notes app on it or something, you can write anything. Music, you can sing, or you can, there are cheaper or more expensive musical instruments. There are so many opportunities to be creative and to come up with ways to express yourself. And I think that there's an opportunity for people to miss out on that if their dabbling in art involves just putting in prompts into an app and seeing images come out. I think it's a cool parlor trick. I'm sure that there will be useful ways that this technology can be used to better parts of society. I'm from a technical aspect, it's very impressive. But I don't like it.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to throw another question out, just different field. We talk regularly about our faith on this podcast, and we have in previous episodes distinguished between, and this is my wording, art done by Christians and Christian art. And we've talked about some of our frustrations with Christian art at times as being of lower quality, at least compared to what else is out there. Whereas we would say art by Christians doesn't show that same distinguishing piece. The best example is, for me, is my favorite artist is Andrew Peterson. And I talk about him. He's a Christian artist, and there's pieces that come out that are explicitly Christian, some that aren't. And I just love the way I think his work can hold up against any contemporary, singer, even as a poet and whatever. What do you think about this as a storyteller yourself? And the stories you tell, like the ones we've been reading through today, are not you wouldn't read this and be like, oh my goodness, Andrew's. You wouldn't necessarily think about faith the entire time you're reading through your pieces.
Yeah,
but I don't know. How would you enter into that conversation? What do you think?
Yeah, so I, as someone who grew up having, I had a few 1950s science fiction movies, a couple Disney movies, and every other form of media that was in the home was Christian.
Mhm.
And in the early 90s, Christian music was mostly pretty bad. I'll say that's a harsh thing to say. That's a personal opinion.
Yeah, there are a few exceptions.
There are definitely a few exceptions. And like I liked the Newsboys growing up, and I think that they're still good. Throughout all their changing lineup and everything.
News talk.
So, yeah. But earlier, I forget what the question was, but there was the quote that that I don't know who to attribute it to, where if you have a message, you should be a preacher. If you want to tell a story, then you tell a story. And you don't want to marry the two. That's the way I approach it. I am a Christian, and so there are some things, so like the mild editing I did for the Gurls, where I chose not to include the swear words. I don't know if I'm going to say that swearing is always a sin or whatever, but just as some things that I like to keep it decent, I like to keep it so that I could show my work to at least teenagers and not feel embarrassed. I could show it to my parents. And I don't know if I could show it to my parents, but but I at least wouldn't feel ashamed.
Yes.
And so I have that, but more than that, I think that there is a large room for expression and joy. And a lot of what we've talked about with Regular Life and Komodo Queen and these other pieces are noticing the world around us, noticing creation, but not just in a way where I'm painting landscapes, because that's not interesting to me. But, one of the more interesting creations being people made in God's image. And there are so many ways that we bump into each other and interact with each other. And it's very complicated, the way that we interact with each other, whether a relationship is good or bad, or just a casual look you give someone at the grocery store. It's always very complicated. It's very rich. And I think exploring that, I can, there's glory to God in that, in documenting these interactions and showing the weight of these people in our lives that maybe we don't even remember because it was such a brief encounter, shape us. Everything that happens shapes us in one way or another. It can change our mood, even just by 1%, but that could be enough to get you through a day. It could be enough to ruin your day. And that's really what's interesting to me. And so far the stories I've told, other than the Halloween sequence in Regular Life, I don't think I have. Maybe there's one other one about church in Regular Life. I don't remember, but I haven't done anything as explicitly religious, I will say. Similar to my comments earlier about wanting to do something on mental health, but not feeling I have the writing chops to do it. If I'm going to explore something religious, I would need to have something interesting to say that is not a message. I don't think that I don't want to make a tract. That's not interesting to me. I don't think that's a good form of communication of these ideas. I think that our faith is more complicated. It's hard to write something explicit in a comic or in a painting that is not. It's like the more explicit you make it, the less it communicates effectively. and so for that reason, I have been more of a Christian artist or an artist who's a Christian than a Christian artist. But I do struggle with that because should I be more explicit? Should I do more comics exploring my faith? Probably, but I don't know what that looks like, I guess.
And maybe it's not worth forcing it. Like, it seems like a large part of the work that you do is, where is it that you are now? And where is it like that? What is it that's on your heart that you want to be working on? And what is it that you have time based off what's on your heart that you can work on?
Yes. There's always the time aspect. Yeah. But I would expect that at some point I will make a comic that more directly deals with my faith and my to use a Christian-y kind of phrase, of my spiritual journey. I think there's a lot of interesting things there. I think that if I can write something that catches the tone of those Halloween pieces, where it is not a Sunday school story, and it is not, on the other side, it is not a condemnation. It is not a railing against shortcomings of humans, but it's just a realistic look and an exploration. I would love to do something like that.
I'm just envisioning like a small group circle conversation.
Yeah.
Like, that's the type of thing that it could almost look like a self-help group, like on the first look, but like the conversation that's going on.
Yeah, because there are doubts, there are questions, there are things that you disagree with, and it's okay to have all those thoughts. But it requires a lot of nuance to write something like that and not either look like a heretic or just a oversimplifying Sunday school teacher.
I really appreciate your answer. I think you dove into so many different pieces. I don't have a necessary response because I just think it was really hit well. I have a fun question, but it is unrelated to you as a storyteller.
Okay.
One of my life goals, and maybe any listeners out here who have your own podcast, this is for you. One of my life goals is to be able to be on a podcast and say, long-time listener, first-time guest. That is like, I want to say that this is an internal goal that like my entire life, like ever since I heard about podcasts, like I want to say I've been a long-time listener, first-time guest. Because one of the things that's really fun about listening to a podcast is, at least for me, is sometimes I feel like I'm part of the conversation, especially when I know what they're talking about. Like, one of my good friends does a podcast, Nate, if you're listening to this, which you probably aren't, pay attention, where they talk about movies. And sometimes I'm like, no, I disagree. Like, hey, you missed this piece, or like, this is what makes this stand out. I know you've listened to a few of our episodes.
Most of them, in fact.
Which just so appreciate. What would you add? Like, are there things that come to your mind having listened to some of these episodes that you're like, you missed this here, or like, I really like that piece, or like, put yourself into any number of them. It doesn't need to be a conjoined, like, oh, this is exactly the process. Like, where in the conversation have we missed out? Where is it that you've enjoyed? Where is it that?
So to be honest, most of the things you guys discuss, I don't know. I am not as well read as I should be. I don't know any musicals. I haven't seen the shows you talk about. I'm not much into Tolkien or fantasy books, so I don't have a lot to contribute to most of it, but I really, really appreciate the discussions and the taking these different pieces of art seriously and worth discussing in detail. I always find it very interesting and funny, and there's a lot of just thought-provoking ideas. I think that the episode you did on Martin Luther King was incredible. It really put a bug in me to educate myself more. And it's hard to follow Martin Luther King. Shouldn't have started with that one, but the Godfather episode is really good. I agree with you that the second movie is maybe technically better, but it is not better than the first one because the first one just feels much better. So I agree with you completely on that. I really enjoyed the discussion of Faulkner and Virginia Woolf, even though I haven't read those pieces. Very interesting discussion, and clearly authors that are worth discussing. I did check out To the Lighthouse from the library, but I returned it unread because I didn't read it.
It'd be really interesting if you returned to unread because you read it a different place instead.
No, but yeah, to answer your question, I've never read or listened to or seen most of the things you guys discuss, and I still listen to every episode anyways.
Oh man, that means a lot. How about The Raven? Have you read that?
The Raven? Yeah, I was familiar with The Raven, and that was interesting to me because I thought that so long ago, I like many people in college and in my 20s, and even in high school, I was so above it all. I was so cool, and I was just like, "Oh, The Raven! Everyone knows The Raven. That's so lame. It's the what was it? The cask of what's the name? Montiago. Like that's so much better. Or the Mask of the Red Death. Like these are so far superiors. And then you open that episode with reading The Raven, and I was just, my breath was taken away. I was like, wow, this is really, really cool. And yeah, so that was great. I was familiar with that, but you guys talked a lot about Poe and a lot about the stories that I haven't read in forever, and I remember the basic plot line, but the discussion of it, the excerpts that you read, it was very, very cool and eye-opening to go back to it. Circling back to what I raised a glass to, of rediscovering something from earlier in my life and being pleasantly surprised that it holds up. There was definitely some of that.
Thanks. I appreciate you entering your voice into the conversation with that. And I don't know how you feel about this, Hunter, but it's just been, it's encouraging to me to hear that. Sometimes we share, and
we hope it's something. We hope it's right.
I can assure you it is something.
All right. Thank you.
And we're always trying to get better, and so we're trying to make sure the way we love having these conversations. Clearly, we talk forever, and we also want it to be the type of thing that other people enjoy and want to enter into as much as possible.
Yeah, well, I think it's great, and I think that your recent episodes are strong, and you've had a lot of strong ones all throughout, but it's shown that you are comfortable now with the format and the pacing and the way you introduce a topic and stuff. It's yeah, you guys are doing great. I love it.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
I think Hunter had one last question for you.
I was just going to ask Andrew if he let him have the last word, if there's anything that he wanted to share, or anything we missed, or.
No, I would just keep it brief and say I really appreciate you guys having me on. This has been a blast, and I feel like I talked a lot, so hopefully it's interesting. I think that I think that comics and paintings are very visual mediums, so hopefully some of it translated through to the podcast, but I'm sure there'll be a link in the show note to my website. Even if you don't buy anything, you can see some sample pages from my comics, and you can see some of my paintings on there, so you can get a sense for what it looks like. And some of the things we talked about are on the website. So I hope people will check that out so they can see what we were talking about.
Yeah.
And you should definitely buy them. It's 100% worth it. And when you're following Andrew on Instagram, what's your...
Yeah, Andrew Mosher Art.
Okay, you should find the festival he's going to be at, find his booth, and come meet him.
And get a mini portrait.
Get a mini portrait of you and your friend and your mom.
Yes.
It's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it. Do it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on, for going the distance with us. It is a bit past midnight. We're gonna, you listeners, you have done this in 2 parts, but we have not, because we have had so much to talk about, because we have the artist here with us, and it has been so much fun. I know it's absolutely fascinating for me to talk about process and learn about the process, because I feel like the conversation about art is just so much about the product and the end result. But really, the more I think about it, it's art is not just what we consume. Art is good for us to do.
Yes.
And it has been really great exploring that with you on the podcast.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for having me. This was a blast, and I think I talked maybe more than Eric. So,
well, that's good. You're the guest, so that's our goal.
Well, thank you so much, Andrew.
Yeah,
it really is a joy. Thank you for being generous with your time.
Yeah.
Thank you.